Welcome to Dark Dreams.
The moon is full and it is dripping with blood.
Now comes Blood Moon Rising magazine.
Original fiction,
Creature features,
nightmarish artwork.
interviews, and other original horror.
Visit bloodmoonrisingmagazine.com and join our Rising Legion.
The Rogue Planet by GAVIN CHAPPELL. The Minister for Atmospheric Affairs regarded his host with considerable annoyance. "Our world faces the greatest threat since the Martian invasion," he snapped. "This rogue planet, Ulysses the astronomers have named it, is heading straight for us. It has passed Mars' orbit and is now bearing down on Earth. How can you be so insufferably calm?" His host regarded him serenely from an overstuffed armchair in his rooms at the Albany. "I've just returned from the far-flung future," he said, fingering the lapels of his green velvet smoking jacket. "The year 3456 AD, on the planet Venus. I don't fear for the future like your voters, my dear chap. I'm sure we can avert catastrophe." "You know the Earth survives?" the minister demanded. "You are certain that Britain and the Empire lives on?" His host, that enigmatic wanderer in the fourth dimension known only as the Time Traveler, stroked a small goatee, and his bushy eyebrows contracted in a frown over deep blue eyes. "The Earth survives for millennia. I've visited the end of time. The British Empire? I've seen no sign of it on my travels. Precious little of the human race, in fact." Mopping his brow, the minister sat down. "Then I must ask again," he said. "How can you be so calm?" "My master is imperturbable, like a true warrior," announced a young woman who had appeared in the doorway. The minister's mouth fell open. He had heard of an olive complexion, but despite wearing the latest in Paris fashion, this particular female had skin as green as grass. "My ward," the time traveler explained. "Miss Yelana, of the planet Venus, many millennia in the future. I rescued her after an attack by cannibal saurians upon her charming lake village." He gave her a slight frown. "Yelana, how many times? I'm not your master." "You are my savior, so you are my master. That is our custom," said Yelana. "You defeated my foes, so I am bound to you in servitude." The minister's head was whirling. He slumped forward, face in his hands. No longer could he take so much shock to his system. Scowling perplexedly, the green girl went to the couch on her haunches beside the time traveler's chair. The time traveler reached out fondly and tweaked her hair. She growled, "How much longer must I wear these uncomfortable clothes, master?" The time traveler rose. "We will leave soon, Yelana. My world is threatened by a rogue planet that screams through space towards us even as we speak. Nothing I can do at this time can avert the destruction of life on Earth." The minister also stood up, his expression dark. "We turned to you in desperation. No one in the government knew what to do. We telegraphed the United States, but Edison had already departed on his punitive expedition to Mars. As a last resort, they sent me to look for you. You are spoken of in the highest circles. If there is nothing you can do, there is nowhere we can turn." "Nothing I can do at this time," the time traveler repeated. "But you forget who I am." He shook the minister's hand, and clapped the bewildered politician on the back. "Tell His Britannic Majesty that all will be well," the time traveler added. I shall journey back in time to the rogue planet some days ago, when it first entered our solar system. He grinned impishly at his ward. To the time machine, Yelana! A footman showed the bewildered minister to the entrance downstairs. He found himself outside in the quiet, tree-lined street, where the brougham awaited him. At the far end towered the burnt-out remains of a Martian fighting machine, a grim reminder of the recent invasion and the precarious nature of life on this planet. Apprehensively, the minister scanned the lowering skies. The time machine winked into existence upon the crags of an arid waste of rocks and sand, a gleaming framework of metal bars, with an ivory and crystal control panel, and a parasol-like fan at the back. It incorporated a saddle, upon which perched both the time-traveler and his attractive ward. The two travelers wore helmets and skin-tight diving suits. "What is this country?" Yelana demanded. "The sky. It's black. It must be night now. What are those streaks of light?" Night skies arched overhead, streaked by light, as Yelana had said. The time-traveler gazed at the dismal scene through the faceplate of his helmet, eyes wide with wonder. Yelana remembered he would not hear her unless she leant her own helmet against his, so she did so and repeated her question. The time-traveler's words echoed back through the metal. "This is it. The rogue planet. Ulysses, days earlier, as it enters our solar system. Those streaks of light are the stars." "Stars stay still," Yelana objected. "They are the sparks from the sunsmith's forge, placed in the heavens by the Sky Lord. Every child knows that." The time-traveler rose and lifted an air tank up from beneath the time machine's saddle. There would be no air where they were going, and they would have to lug their own air about with them, much as the giant snails of the swamplands of Yelana's own world carried their houses about with them. She helped him, and together they set foot on the rogue planet. "Ulysses travels at vast speed," he explained, leaning his helmet against Yelana's. "Earth and Venus, for that matter, rotate around the sun relatively slowly, so the stars seem fixed. Ulysses' velocity shows skies where the stars seem to shoot past, although the truth is, the planet is moving with unbelievable swiftness." Snowdrifts covered the rocks. As the time-traveler examined them, he lifted his helmeted head and looked in wonder toward the craggy skyline. Wordlessly, he pointed. On the edge of the crags stood a human-like figure. The time-traveler put his own helmet against hers. "Life? On the dead planet?" he mused. "The world is hurtling through the universe at incredible speeds. There can be no atmosphere, yet there is snow, and now a figure." A horizontal line of light brightened the skyline. The sun rose and flooded the rocks with harsh light. Yelana had never seen so abrupt a sunrise, not even at the end of the long night of her own world, certainly not on Earth, where sunrise seemed sluggish by comparison, despite its frequency. The sunlight was almost blinding as it suffused the sky and the surrounding landscape, sending shadows skittering across the rocks. It glittered savagely from the motionless figure. The time-traveler bounded away to investigate it. He stopped beside a snowdrift, turned, and beckoned. As uncomfortable in her skin-tight protective suit as she had been in the garments of the time-traveler's own period, Yelana joined him. She saw that the snowdrift was melting in the sunlight that now blazed down on the bleak landscape, like high noon on the metal seas of Venus. Snowmelt pooled on the rock and trickled into the sand. Yelana put her helmet against the time-traveler's. "It is the end of their long night," she told him. "This world is more like my own than yours." The time-traveler's voice boomed back. "This can only mean life. How can it have survived the journey across the stars?" He stepped back. Yelana saw his hands reach up to the hinge of his helmet faceplate. His gloved fingers worked clumsily. To her horror, it swung open. "No!" her words echoed futilely back from within her helmet. There was no way they could reach him across empty space between them. But what did that matter? He had opened his faceplate. The air would rush from his lungs. He had warned her about this before they departed Earth. And yet he stood there, grinning insufferably, then reached up again to remove his helmet completely. Yelena stepped forward to remonstrate with him, then shrieked with horror as green tentacles burst from the soil and writhed towards her. The time traveler leapt forwards, flinging his helmet down as he did. He seized at the tentacles and tore them away. To Yelena's horror, more came up from the soil. Some writhed against the time traveler's legs. He brushed them away, then laughed suddenly. Yelena scowled at him. She removed her helmet. All around them green things were writhing upwards, surrounding them, blocking out the blazing sunlight. Verdant moss spread out across the stones like green ink. "What's so funny?" she demanded. The time traveler took great gulps of the air. Yelena noticed it was sweet and pure and slightly perfumed. The green tentacles branched out and swayed over their heads. They were paying no heed to the two people. "They're plants," he said. "Harmless." Yelena felt aggrieved. Plants did not act like this on her own world, nor, as far as she had seen, on the time traveler's planet. Plants? The time traveler took her arm and led her through the jungle that had so suddenly appeared. Through the vegetation, Yelena saw the unmoving figure, festooned now with creepers. Sunlight poured down. "This planet's plant life must hibernate in the soil when it is voyaging through the void," he said. "When it nears a new sun whose rays warm the ground, the vegetation bursts forth incontinently into fresh life, like desert plants when the rains come. Initially I thought they were attacking you, but they didn't even know we were here. They follow an instinct to grow, and the atmosphere. Did you see the snow has gone? The snow has evaporated, and now surrounds us. The planet's atmosphere." "What about animals?" Yelena asked. "Are there any animals on this planet?" "Surely only microbes and bacteria could survive these conditions," the time traveler murmured, as they came out where the glittering statue now stood on the edge of the crags. "Yet here we have what is clearly an example of art, a sculpture of a being that must have dwelt upon this world once, when it permanently circled a star, before whatever titanic forces tore it from its orbit and sent it tumbling through space." He gazed sadly at the figure, a man-like form of metal 7 feet high, with a muscular torso, massive legs and arms, and a face that was blank except for a round hole in place of a mouth and 2 slits for eyes. Topping its head was a flat disk of metal, which seemed to be absorbing the sunlight. Yelena heard a vague buzzing, humming noise. It seemed to come from the statue. The time traveler tapped it on the shoulder. Whoever posed for the sculptor must have been in their grave for millennia. "Don't touch it!" Yelena shrieked, but it was too late. The hum grew louder. The eye-like slits lit up a fiery red. Jerkily the statue lurched forward, ripping away the creepers that hung it, and seized the time traveler. "An automaton," the time traveler enthused. "It must draw its power from the sun. Hello!" The statue lifted him off his feet. In a flash, Yelena tore a branch off a nearby plant and attacked the automaton. The green branch split wetly the first time she hit the metal man. The hum from within the automaton's chest changed to a high-pitched, ear-splitting wail. Yelena put her hands over her ears as the noise grew louder. She heard the tramp of metal feet from behind her. Gagging with pain, she turned and saw 2 more automatons smashing their way out of the jungle. The first automaton's distress call had alerted them, wherever they had been. They bore down and seized her. The first one's distress call ended. It turned to the others, and its eye slits glowed even brighter. Then it turned and dragged the time traveler away. "I say, put me down, old chap. I'm sure we can discuss this in a civilized fashion," the time traveler babbled. The other automatons dragged Yelena after their leader. "Where are they taking us?" she demanded. "Don't struggle," said the time traveler helpfully. "I'm sure this is simply a misunderstanding." They came out into a clearing. Ahead of them was a cliff, in whose face stood a metal door. The leader automaton dragged the time traveler up to it and rested its forearm against a depression in the rock. The door slid upwards, revealing a dark tunnel. "In here?" the time traveler asked politely. The automaton forced him ahead. Its fellows dragged Yelena after them. The tunnel opened out into a large chamber, lit by glowing panels in the walls. On the far side, a large control console stood on a podium. Above it was a large metallic screen. In between the entrance and the control console stood several more motionless statues, surrounding a slab upon which sat a crystal sarcophagus containing a recumbent figure. The leader automaton marched past the sarcophagus to the console, metal feet clanging as it ascended the iron steps leading onto the podium, dragging the time traveler behind it. Its steely hand opened, releasing the time traveler. Then the automaton seized a gun-like object from the console and pointed it at him. A white ray sprang out and struck the time traveler, who was frozen in his tracks. "Master!" Yolana shouted from where the other two automatons held her beside the sarcophagus. "What have they done?" With difficulty, the time traveler spoke. "It must have been some kind of ray, like the Martians use. But rather than killing, it simply paralyzes. My mind is awake, my mouth is clearly operational, but the rest of me is immobile." His eyes turned to the leader automaton, who stood poised over the control console. An iron hand reached out. Metal fingers depressed buttons. Next, the automaton seized a large lever and pulled it straight down. Near Yolana, the lid of the crystal sarcophagus slid open. The form within stirred. A hand rose out of the sarcophagus, took feeble hold of the side. The other hand followed. A being hauled itself up into a sitting position. A ghastly face, withered and ancient, lifeless as a corpse, except for two blazing eyes, turned to gaze at Yolana. Puzzled, the being turned towards the leader automaton at the console. "Who are you?" Yolana demanded. The being ignored her, clambering out of the sarcophagus. Yolana saw that it was a man, at least 7 feet in height, dressed in glittering robes and carrying an ornate scepter in one hand. Stretching mightily, he surveyed the chamber in silence, then placed the scepter down on the side of the sarcophagus and walked onto the podium. "The long sleep has ended," he announced in ringing, vibrant tones. "But who are these aliens who infest my hibernation chamber?" The leader automaton uttered an eerie series of beeps and twitters. The newcomer listened intently, as if the sounds made sense to him. Then he turned to the time traveler. "My robots inform me that you are found on the surface, interlopers," he said. "If they are active, it can only mean that our world has entered a solar system. Do you come from a nearby planet?" Weakly, the time traveler nodded. "Yes." The being took the ray gun from the leader automaton, adjusted some settings, and fired another ray, which released the time traveler. He pressed a button with one claw-like finger, and the screen above the console sprang into life, showing the solar system from the rogue planet's viewpoint. "I am Vanderdecken, overlord of this wandering world," he told them. "It was my gravity engineering that caused us to break free from our orbit around a dying star in order to travel free and unfettered through the cosmos. My race hibernates in vast chambers deep below us, guarded by my robots. Soon we shall all awake, and descend upon the planets of this system, to subjugate them, and strip them of their wealth and resources. Tell me, how many inhabited planets are there? What technological accomplishments do they have? What kind of space travel did you use to reach my world?" "Don't tell him anything, Master," Yolana shouted. The time traveler gave her a quelling look, then addressed Vanderdecken. "I must apologize. My companion is from one of our more primitive planets." He indicated the screen. 3 worlds are capable of supporting life. Yolana's planet will only produce, intelligent life millennia in the future, which is when I met her." "Then you're a time traveler," Vanderdecken demanded. "My people strove to develop time travel in vain. You will show me your device, and if it is truly capable of such travel, we shall use it to extend our empire into the 4th dimension. What of the other planets?" "Earth and Mars both have civilizations," the time traveler replied. "They have even developed space travel, recently becoming embroiled in interplanetary war." He glanced at the screen. "Mars is not visible now. Its orbit has taken it beyond the sun. But there is my planet, that green star, Earth. Excellent, said Vanderdecken. We shall divide and conquer. Why are you telling him this? Yelena shouted. She struggled futilely in the iron grip of the automatons. Had her beloved master turned traitor? Vanderdecken laughed. This savage has no understanding of the realities, he told the time traveler. But you are a civilized man, I can see. I'm a subject of the British Empire, the time traveler replied. I know that if one is to propagate one's view of the world, or even the universe, it is necessary to reinforce one's beliefs with military might. I have seen many different ages, and God is always on the side of the big battalions. Your planet, Vanderdecken, is the greatest power the solar system has ever seen, but even your plan has its faults. Faults? Vanderdecken roared. You minuscule worm, you prattling primitive, you dare babble to me of faults? You forget, said the time traveler calmly. I may be from a primitive world, but I am a man of science who has invented time travel, something of which even your own people know nothing. Let me show you how you could drain the energy of planet Earth from a close orbit without needing to resort to war. The time traveler sat down at the console, showing Vanderdecken what he intended to do. Vanderdecken listened solemnly, nodding. The time traveler's fingers flickered over the keys on the console, and the image of the solar system on the screen altered as it hurtled towards the tiny planet that orbited the vast, flaming sun. In horror, Yelena looked on as the time traveler explained his plan to Vanderdecken. How could the man who had rescued her village sell out the entire solar system to this interplanetary pirate? The time traveler reached out and pressed another button. A high-pitched noise rang out. Then the time traveler continued to guide the planet towards Earth. Ulysses was passing through the asteroid belt now, and Yelena knew from what she had learnt that they had passed the gas giants and were now bearing down on the inner planets. She watched in impotent frustration. Soon we will be entering the Earth's orbit, the time traveler announced. From here, it will be possible to rain the planet's surface with rays that will drain it of all its energy, leave the inhabitants drained husks. You will destroy your own people, said Vanderdecken. I like to be on the winning side, the time traveler replied calmly. What my fellow countryman, Charles Darwin, called survival of the fittest. The Earth swam up out of space, blue and beautiful, almost as beautiful as Yelena's own world. She felt a lump in her throat, and involuntarily took a step forward. To her astonishment, the automaton's grip on her arms had loosened. She realized their hum had stopped a while ago. The lights in their eyes had been extinguished. What was happening? Tentatively, she pulled herself away. They did not react. The others stood silent, unmoving, all around the chamber. She seized the scepter that lay beside the sarcophagus, swung it at the nearest automaton, and knocked off its metal head in a fountain of sparks. When there was no reaction from its fellows, she sprinted for the podium. Vanderdecken turned around, an angry expression on his cadaverous face. She clattered up the steps. Your savage is loose, he snarled, seizing the ray gun from the console. As he rose to fire it, Yelena knocked it from his hand with the scepter. Robots, Vanderdecken roared. To me! Why do they not respond? He lashed out with a booted foot. Yelena leapt back with agile grace. Then she attacked again, swinging the scepter at him. She saw the time traveler look up from the console, his eyes wide. She bared her teeth at her treacherous master, then returned to the attack. Vanderdecken seized her by the wrist. She struggled to free herself, then stamped down on his instep. As he staggered back, she beat him to the ground with a single savage blow. She bore down upon the time traveler. He met her eyes without fear. What are you doing, silly girl? He demanded. Put that down. She lifted the scepter over her head. She wanted to kill him, split his skull, this man who had meant so much to her. This man who was now willing to destroy the planets of the solar system. But she couldn't do it. Instead, she brought the scepter crashing down with all her might on the console. It exploded in sparks, showering them both. What have you done? The time traveler shouted, rising. I've stopped you, haven't I, master? Yelena cried triumphantly. Vanderdecken groaned and tried to rise, but she kicked him with brutal precision, and he collapsed. Now this maniac won't be able to suck your planet dry. The vampire. Now the solar system is safe. Yelana, the time traveler said, you surely didn't believe I intended to do that. Why did you think I sent out the signal to disable the automatons? Yelana scowled, confused. Had he? I freed you, he added. But not to do this. So you could escape. This planet is now heading inexorably into the gravitational pull of the sun. I had hoped to use this fact as a lever to negotiate with Vanderdecken, tell him I would stop before it was too late, on the assurance he would leave the solar system. Now this entire planet is doomed. Can't you stop it before it's too late? Yelana demanded. The time traveler shook his head. The controls are inoperable, thanks to your meddling. The planet will be dragged inexorably into the sun. The process is now irreversible. These people will be wiped out. Can we escape? If we could find the time machine in the depths of that jungle outside, the time traveler replied frantically. But should we leave, we would condemn the population of an entire planet to death. Do we have the right? Yelana dragged him from the chair. They would have destroyed your planet. Come on. Abandoning Vanderdecken to his fate, they ran out into the jungle. Again the minister scanned the skies. He gazed from the window of his office in Westminster. Over London all was blue and serene. He glanced back at the astronomer's report. At the 11th hour the rogue planet had veered past Earth. According to the calculations, it would spiral directly into the sun. The minister sighed. There had been no sign of the time traveler and his strangely attractive companion. He could not but wonder, had the time traveler saved the world from the threat of Ulysses? If so, had he escaped? Or was he trapped on that doomed planet? Had he sacrificed himself for humanity? Only time would tell. Dance with Me, A Winter's Tale by LARS KRAMHOFT. When Cornell came to me to ask my advice about the deaths on M Street, I didn't make the connection at first. I had not yet realized the extent of Charlotte's vanity, of her solipsism, or the price she had been and still was willing to pay. It had been almost a year since her funeral. Some nights I clung to my dreams of her, which at once tormented me and, I suspect, kept me sane. Other nights I lay awake and tried very hard not to wish to forget how she'd felt, pressed up against me. The grief, instead of pouring out and flowing naturally, had congealed around me and trapped me in the thick gray stupor of misery. One evening I'd switched on the TV and there was a commercial on for some new car. They used the song Sway by Pablo Ruiz, the original English-language version, sung by Dean Martin, and it made me break down and cry. When marimba rhythms start to play, dance with me and make me sway, like the lazy ocean hugs the shore. I never got to take Charlotte dancing like she had always talked about. She wanted us to take mambo classes together. Never comfortable dancing without a few drinks in me, I kept postponing it until one day she was gone. I cried then on the floor of my apartment as the mild yet sultry rhythms streamed from my TV set. I cried because I missed her, and because it seemed unfair that something as tawdry as a car commercial could reopen the wound in my heart. I submerged myself in cannabis, alcohol, and old black and white movies again. Money was running out, and I should have been working on my next book. But I never seemed able to hammer out more than a few stiff sentences that refused to come to life, and I'd end up exiting without saving. A couple of days after the car commercial incident, I was torn from my torpor by a knocking on the door. I went out to answer it, wearing only boxers and the same t-shirt I'd had on for 3 days. It was Cornell, the commissioner, a burly man in his 40s with a ruddy face and short, crew-cut hair the color of a used pound sterling. He looked even more spent than I was, more tired at least, with purple-black circles in the pale skin under his eyes. I sometimes helped the police out. It wasn't official, even though I've been told arrangements like Cornell's and mine are more common than you might think. It is, of course, very hush-hush. Maybe you read about the capture of the Canning Town killer a couple of years back? That was me. I helped Cornell and his men track him down to his little shed where he had his victim's severed fingers dangling on pieces of wire from the ceiling. I led Cornell into the living room where, on the TV, the Marx Brothers kept swapping around a number of identical suitcases, to the great exasperation of Sig Rumen. While I was clearing some space for us to sit down, Cornell stood with his hands behind his back and glanced over the many newspaper clippings and Xeroxed magazine spreads that cluttered on the wall behind my laptop. Sightings, confessions, and underexposed photographs. Pentagrams on church aisles, evanescent, vague female shapes descending stairs, etc. "How's the book coming along?" he asked. I sighed, made some vague excuse that drowned in the rattle as I shuffled empty pizza boxes away. I didn't want to talk about it. The thing about being a writer is, as soon as you find yourself unable to write, you stop being one. "It's been over a year now," Cornell said. "What do you want?" I said. She was the one. We sat down on each side of the coffee table, Cornell on my old Windsor chair, his legs wide apart and his forearms resting on his thighs, and myself on the couch. "Okay, I need your help," he said. Then he started laying out the facts about the deaths in the council house on M Street, number 33. "It began a month ago, on the 1st of October. Mary and Wendy Jenkins, ages 5 and 6, were killed by their father, Mr. Jenkins, with a power drill. His wife called it in when she found out. The crazy bugger couldn't give us any kind of explanation as to why he did it. We've got him locked up in the scrubs for now, trying to figure out if he really is crazy. He doesn't seem to care the slightest bit what happens to him." Cornell exhaled heavily, shaking his head. "Well, as gruesome as that seems, it's not like we haven't seen that sort of thing before," he continued. "But as it turns out, that was just the beginning. Shortly after the deaths of Mary and Wendy Jenkins, a woman had drowned her husband and left his corpse in the bathtub for 3 weeks before it was found. The content of the bathtub had resembled meat sauce," Cornell explained. Like Mr. Jenkins, she had been apathetic and unable to provide an explanation. Then a teenage boy had jumped off the roof. Then a young musician had killed his Australian couch-surfing guest with a hammer. And so on. Every case was different. The latest victim was a single, divorced social worker named Miss Gibbons, who'd hanged herself just 3 days ago. That makes it 9 deaths within a month, with nothing in common except for the address. I'm beginning to wonder if we've got a regular haunted house on our hands here. Cornell laughed humorlessly. I should have felt something, I guess, when I heard about all those people. Sadness, horror, righteous anger. Instead, I just felt numb. "I thought maybe we could swing by and you can take a look around, see if you can sense anything," Cornell said. "Honestly, I gotta tell you, we're at our wits' end here." "Sure," I said. Not like I have anything better to do. I had a quick change of clothes, gathered my tools, and put them in a bag. Then we left my building and walked to Cornell's car while big, fluffy snowflakes tumbled silently down over London. "Number 33 is right next to St. Mark's," Cornell said when he started the car, as if that hadn't occurred to me. St. Mark's was where we'd buried Charlotte. Today was November the 5th, and a month ago it would have been our anniversary. On the drive to M Street, everything I saw reminded me of Charlotte. From all the license plates on parked cars that now suddenly spelled her initials, to the faces on missing persons posters. Charlotte. 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 I guess I should tell you about Charlotte. We were married for 12 years, and it should have been the be-all and end-all, except that things didn't work out like that. She had been a pin-up model and had looked quite a bit like Marilyn Hanold. Curvaceous, glamorous and brown-eyed, but with a modern Gothic edge. That was her thing. In short, she'd looked amazing, and by God, she'd known it. I don't think I ever saw her pay for bus fare or a train ticket. If a conductor came, all she had to do was turn on her looks and bat her lashes. And then, of course, she'd been a witch. We'd had a picture from one of her pin-up shoots hanging on the wall, showing her wearing a pointy black hat and straddling a broomstick, framed by a harvest moon painted on cardboard, in an homage to Gil Elvgren's classic Riding High pin-up. We laughed a lot about that. Charlotte had mostly done white magic, like when she cured our beloved black cat monster of cancer with a spell. I knew she still did some of the black as well, behind my back, but that was just in her nature, and I never said anything about that. Because here's the thing about Charlotte. For all her vanity and her flirtations with the dark arts, she had essentially been a good person. I'll never forget this one evening we went for a walk through Battersea Park. It was in the fall, and a chill wind was blowing in from the Thames. We'd just started dating then. We came across an old homeless man who had collapsed on the gravel path. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was inclined to walk in a big circle around the poor man and not think much of it. But not Charlotte. She went over to see if he was alive. And when it turned out he was, she helped him up on a bench, and even gave him the few dollars she had on her. Even with all her makeup, her lace, and her plateau boots, she wasn't too good for that sort of thing. I think that was the day I fell in love with her. She died of heart failure at the age of 36. The doctors said it was a congenital thing, that it could have happened any time. But why was she taken from me? I knew the question was stupid, irrelevant even. She just died, like so many people do. And there were no hidden hands or evil gods behind it, pulling the strings. We want so badly to understand the things that happen, yet all the really important things, who we fall in love with, who lives and who dies, are ultimately beyond understanding. It was late in the afternoon when we reached M Street, and the snow had covered the pavement and the rooftops in a white quilt that made the council houses look almost black in comparison. Cornell parked the car in front of number 33, and the fresh snow squeaked under our feet when we walked across the parking lot. I caught a glimpse of St. Mark's, all slim and Gothic and wedged in between the council houses as we walked. In front of the church, framed by spindly ironwork, lay the little patch of cemetery where we'd buried Charlotte, with the headstones protruding from the snow, dark and jagged, and the skeletal trees reaching for the sky. It looked like a scenery from a snow globe. Number 33 was a typical council house from the 50s, built to house poor people. Inside it was poorly lit, with hallways as tortuous as the insides of a snail shell, and chartreuse walls that swallowed any light and shat out murky shadows. The names on the doors were spelled in interchangeable white letters, like some obscure urban cipher. We first went to apartment 22B on the second floor, the one where Mary and Wendy Jenkins were killed. Cornell fumbled with the keychain in the quiet hallway, then opened the door, brushed aside the yellow tape, and invited me inside. Immediate impression of the room. Murky, swamp-like, almost suffocating. The residue of Mr. Jenkins' crime still clung to the walls like years of cigarette smoke. I put my bag down on the floor and got to work. The rituals themselves are almost offensively simple, the liturgy banal. It's basically just a matter of opening a channel, and usually the souls will flock to you like pigs to the slaughter. I'm sorry, I know the analogy is in poor taste, but you have to know that most of the souls that linger on are pale ones. They're a drab bunch. Most of them are not, as one might expect, murder victims, though there are a few of those. For the most part, which I guess is rather depressing, they are just souls that are so obsessed with some wrong they think was done to them, some chance they never got, or some person that ruined their life by leaving them, or, as it happens, not leaving them. They will clutter around you and tug at your sleeves with their ephemeral hands and do their best to make you cry. But not today. Not in 22B. Even the ghosts are scared in this house, I thought, and a chill rose up my spine. We locked the door behind us and went up the stairs to the 4th floor to try our luck in number 47, a bleak bachelor pad with movie posters on the walls, where the tenant, a young visual FX artist, had slit his wrists and bled to death in the shower cabin. I'd hardly begun the ritual when voices resounded from out of the walls, one moment loud and booming through the apartment, the next dropping to a muffled whispering, creating a cacophony that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The manifestation was so powerful that even Cornell heard it, and looked confusedly around the apartment. Then a spectral young man tumbled out of the wall right in front of me, all mad and howling, and rushed straight at me. He passed right through me as if I wasn't there, and disappeared again into the wall behind me. Cornell had to help me back up and fetch me a glass of water. Though he appeared again 2 times within the following hour, the young man proved to be of no help to us. He just appeared, like a sudden flickering flame, screamed and howled at us, and then vanished again. The poor wretch probably hadn't even realized he was dead. The 3rd apartment we decided to try was number 69, where Miss Gibbons, the social worker, had killed herself only 3 days ago. We hoped that the more recent nature of her death would yield more clues. Outside the windows, the darkness was condensing around the council house. Both Cornell and I were in a pretty lousy mood when we entered the apartment, and the moment I crossed the doorstep, an intense sensation of dread hit me like a freight train. It had lingered there, waiting for someone sensitive enough to recognize it. I had to pause for a moment and lean against the wall to get my bearings. The air seemed so cold it wouldn't have surprised me to see my breath bloom like smoke in front of my face. After a moment I rushed to the far end of the apartment where I found a small, windowless room. The wallpaper was adorned with crude drawings in crayon. Toys that had obviously been procured in second-hand shops lay sprawled across the carpet. Forgotten superheroes in garish colors, some of them missing arms or legs, as if having been wounded in some obscure Saturday morning brawl. Plastic dinosaurs with strange, inappropriate expressions and incorrect anatomy. A clunky red tape recorder with a little microphone attached on a wire. I went back into the hallway where Cornell looked at me, puzzled. "She had a son?" I asked. "Joint custody," Cornell said. 5 years old. They found him hiding in that room down there. He motioned toward the room with the toys and the tape recorder. Apparently he was in here with her corpse for 2 days before the neighbors realized something was wrong. He was in shock. Hadn't been able to call anyone or anything. I went back to the pathetic little room where Miss Gibbons had done the best she could with what she had to fashion a nursery for her son. I picked up one of the plastic figures, turned it in my hand, then put it down again. Then I went over to the wall and squatted on my haunches to look at the drawstrings. They showed a child's relative topography of his surroundings. There were the buildings, and there was the little cemetery they lined. There was the artist himself, or so I gathered, looking out of a window, and there was the woman in the cemetery, looking up at him, seeming to wave or beckon with long, rake-like fingers. The woman in the cemetery. I leaned in closer and startled when the red tape recorder began to play. It wasn't the fact that one of its chubby, child-friendly digits had clicked down seemingly of its own accord, but the song it was playing that made me startle. The gentle yet sultry rhythm and the words I'd heard just a couple of days before now filled the little room through a vague crackle of static. Sway by Pablo Ruiz, the original English language recording, sung by Dean Martin. When marimba rhythms start to play, dance with me and make me sway, like the lazy ocean hugs the shore. I hung my head as a tear stole its way down my face. That night I came back to the cemetery, carrying my bag and my tools, and waited in the shadow of a tree that no longer carried any leaves, only black, sleeping birds. The snow had stopped falling, and the cemetery lay spread out before me in a tender, moonlit silence. Above me, a bird rustled in its sleep. I have no idea for how long I waited, but eventually I saw movement under one of the headstones. The snow jutted up, as if something was burrowing beneath it, and then the frozen crust burst, and bony fingers extended toward the sky. Something rose from its grave. I don't know what I expected, but I felt a chill that was beyond that which was caused by the cold night air. A skeleton, the color of dirty snow, climbed up out of the ground. I held my breath as Charlotte rose to her full height and looked around the snow-covered graveland with empty sockets. Maybe she was surprised to see it had snowed, though I doubt she could feel the cold. She strutted toward the center of the cemetery as if entering a stage, her movement a choppy, bone-dry staccato. Though stripped clean of her flesh, there was an unearthly elegance to her still, and I was mesmerized, as the sound of the snow crunching beneath her, and the mild grinding of her joints, a peculiar, fragile sound, reached my ears. And I saw my strange skeleton bride extend towards number 33, fingers like twigs that burgeoned only under the light of the moon. And I saw my Charlotte extract the dreams of those that slept inside the council house, like a moth sucking nectar from a night-blooming flower. Streams of phosphorescent purple fog wafted out of the windows and danced slowly through the air and down towards her. When the moonbeams passed through them, the streams glimmered as if sprinkled with gold dust, and in that glimmering I could see glimpses of the dreams she was stealing. There was an old woman's dream of a childhood sweetheart, a chance she hadn't dared to take. There was a little boy's fear of some unnameable thing under the stairs, and there a timid young woman's dream of standing up to her vexatious boss. The skeleton that had been Charlotte took all those dreams and wrapped them around her bones, fashioning them into a weave in the likeness of sinew, muscle, and perfect skin. At that point I stepped out from under the tree. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw in her stolen eyes an inclination to run like a deer, frightened of the hunter. Then the look changed, became one of sadness and acceptance. She'd missed me. I offered my hand, and she acquiesced. The touch of the dream flesh sent goosebumps reeling up my arm and all the way up around my neck, where it curled up and settled across my shoulders. I put my arm around her, and as I remembered how it felt when her hips lulled against me, I was happy, and tears started running down my cheeks. People go insane if they can't dream their dreams, but I don't think she cared. She just wanted to be beautiful again. She rested her head against my shoulder, and I realized she knew what was going to happen next, had resigned herself to it. She had wanted me to come, had called out to me to come and put her to rest for good, to lay her down among the dead, and speak the incantations. She was a good person, after all. She just wanted her dance. And so we danced, under the moonlight, and I made her sway. When it was all over, and I left the cemetery, it had started snowing again. I imagined that the snowflakes were kisses that melted on my face.
horrifiedpress.wordpress.com.
Hey Horrified Press fans, Nathan Jonathan David Lee ROWARK here, Editor-in-Chief. Going to be talking about fracking in our social horror segment. We'll also be reading you part of my story in Horrified Press Anthology, Tales of the Undead Hell Whore. If you haven't picked up a copy yet, make sure that you do. In the meantime, let's get some music on while I get warmed up, because in the UK it is wet and cold as usual. Where's my tea? That was Dr. Wily with It's Okay, We Have Chemistry. Guess he gave up trying to catch Mega Man, you know, went into electronic music. It's probably for the best. For our social horror segment this week, I'm going to talk to you about fracking. Fracking is basically when heads of powerful energy commissions get overly obsessed with the idea of power and start, shafting their own shafts. Now, that's not true. Fracking is a process used to mine energy, and fracking is going on here in the UK at the moment in West Sussex, and it's caused demonstrations. People are gathering to demonstrate because they feel that the reason why we had an earthquake in November of 2012 was because of this same process that's being used to gather extra energy for the UK, which apparently really needs it. Now, I don't see it that way, because I picked up a paper today, I won't name the paper, and they're trying to tell me that the reason for the fracking and why it's so important is because it's going to help reduce energy costs for poorer households. Now, I'm not sure how accurate the source is, but I was given information that the energy companies made an average collectively of £300 billion last year. So I've got an idea. that might help reduce energy costs for poorer people. It's a bit radical. Stop overcharging them. I think that really is the key. Or at the very least, stop increasing the charges and absorb them out of the £300 billion that you're currently making on a yearly basis from us. Now, I know that's a bit of a crazy suggestion, but I really think it'll work. So we can hope that that will come true. Fingers crossed. What upsets me about the whole situation is that the protesters were broken up. The police enforced 10 different constabularies decided to surround the drill to stop any protesters halting the work. And despite the fact that certain ministers in the UK have also expressed their worries and concerns about the technique of fracking, they've still gone ahead. It's not surprising to me in this world, and especially in this country at the moment, that money came first. However, what use is that money going to be when we're all living on chunks of an island which has been ravaged by earthquakes and is floating out into the Atlantic Ocean? It's not really going to be much use, is it really, for anybody? But that's just me. I just tend to see the common sense of things. I wonder what anyone in the UK listening to this thinks about the whole fracking debate. And as always, you can email me at nathan.rowark@live.co.uk. Make the subject heading podcast questions, and I'd like to hear your opinions, because I feel that the balance between sanity and reason, as opposed to greed and superficial let's get it today and fuck tomorrow, it seems to be quite skewed. Just reduce the cost. It's that simple. Anyway, on with the show.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Lay me down in a field of guns and roses, where the cowboy mouth whistles needle in the hay. I'm not the bad guy, I must confess. I needed someone to help me clean up the mess. Where we lie, 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 lie. Where we lie, 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 lie. Where we lie. Hotel Chelsea suicide sounds romantic in the moment. Watch the loved ones cry from the best seats in the house. Butcher and baker, child of the corn, sleepy and naked, her body still warm. Where we lie, 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 lie. Where we lie, 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 lie. Where we lie. Hotel melody. Lay me down in a field of guns and roses, where the cowboy mouth whistles needle in the hay. Where we lie, 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 lie.
That was Fields of Guns N' Roses by Mike Viola. So at the moment, yours truly has embarked upon 5 anthology books that we are, that I am now editing, now that the submission period is closed. We have opened submissions for a new anthology on the Horrified Press site called Plague. The details for that are on the Horrified Press site, and we are still also open for Nightmare Walkers and Dream Stalkers. We're still open for submissions to Dark in the Limelight, and we're still open for submissions to Spawned from the Social Networks. So you can catch up with all those anthologies on the Horrified Press site, and I look forward to reading your submissions for those horror writers out there. Horror fans, you can also check out the Horrified Press site. We've recently put up a post to outline not only the titles that are currently available from Horrified Press, but where you can purchase them. There's links in the post that will allow you to click on them, and you can go through and you can purchase our books. Do remember that our books are by over 20 different authors from around the world, and the royalty payments that they will receive is based on your contributions, the public, on buying these books. They're really well put together books, I can honestly say that. The authors are incredible talents, and the stories were really, really strong. So you will be entertained, it's worth it. And you can pick up our ebook versions of our anthologies for $3, £2, which, you know, is a bottle of Coke from a bad vending machine on the good side of town, as I've said before. So there we go. The other thing I would also like to mention is that we have a novel coming out by Jason Gerlert called Contagion, which is an absolute masterpiece of a book. It's an incredible book and has already received some great reviews because it was previously released by another press. This is a new, more modernised version. It's a tidier version, and it's really been reimagined for 2013. So I would highly recommend that you grab a copy of Contagion. It's released on August the 26th and is available from lulu.com. In terms of royalties, this artist needs to sell just 30 copies of either the ebook or the paperback edition to receive his first royalty payment. We're offering our novelists 70% of the profits. So I really hope that you will get behind Jason on that. It's a great book. It really reminds me of classic 80s horror, and I was really engrossed in it, I have to say. I mean, sometimes you can read through a work 3-4 times during the editing process, and with this book each time it was fresh and exciting, and I was really pleased to be working on it. And you know, you can say that for most of the works, actually, that I can say that for most of the works that we receive, but occasionally it's not the case. Occasionally I will accept a work on the basis that it's well written, it's a good story, whether it appeals to me or not, but it will appeal to our audience. But with this, it didn't. I didn't just know that it would appeal to our audience, it also, you know, really appealed to me. So there we go. That's my little plea on behalf of Jason Gerlert there. August 26th, lulu.com. Make sure you pick up a copy of his fantastically frightening book. So now I'm going to read you The Last Devil of Men. Well, I'm going to read you the first part. The Last Devil of Men is a short story written by myself that was included in our anthology Tales of the Undead Hellhole, and that's available on lulu.com as well. They are available on other channels. You can buy them at the iBookstore, Amazon. So many channels they are available on. Volumes 1 and 2 for Hellhole now, and we've also got Tales of the Undead Suffer Eternal, Volumes 1 and 2 available as well. On the 16th of September, we will be releasing the last part of Suffer Eternal trilogy of anthologies, which is Tales of the Undead Suffer Eternal Volume 3. And now I'm going to read you an excerpt from The Last Devil of Men. I consider those great men you speak of, Beethoven and Picasso, and recognise amongst the genius of their work a measure of myself. It was always this way, from the moment I was born, and shall remain so until the day I die. The woman looked perplexed. So were you coerced, or predisposed almost to realise the being's dreams? A wry grin slipped across the crevice of Darley's slight mouth, hidden beneath the curl of his tended moustache. I always knew one day you would recognise him, he revealed, satisfied. I just had to wait long enough for you to rediscover me. It began with your brother, didn't it? The woman decided. No, Darley snapped. He was the first to be taken by its will, yet it was my unwillingness to conform to the world flustered about me that gave cause for my transformation to take place. She gasped. Butterflies. Darley nodded in agreement. To metamorphose my own attitudes, using the subjects I found increasingly preoccupying my ever-waking thoughts, I first had to transform myself. So when did you become aware that you were not alone in your tastes, that there was someone else with you in the room? From the very beginning, Salvador smiled. My feline ocelot picked up on its presence almost immediately, before my simple nose had the audacity to scent it. Babot would sit with me as I would paint, a sullen muse to my work at times, a harsh critic others. His passing only exacerbated the futility I felt in my brief span here, when being left without him. On no particular evening I would recommend that you take the time to delve into the wonder beheld by a cat's curious stare. They experience a vision of the world that we dare not. The female visitor looked unimpressed with Darley's pleasurable discourse. Instead, she rather wished to impress her own unqualified theories on his inspirations, so as to have the great man himself validate them. But it wasn't your ocelot that shaped your view on things, it was the political and social changes that were going on around you which altered the nature of your work, right? Salvador removed himself from his plush chair of cushioning fibres and leant down hard on a silver-topped cane ever present by his side. Twirling round his shaking fingers the inspirational antenna of his trademark whiskers, Darley edged closer to the window of his theatre museum. Outstretched before him, the town of Figurine struggled to raise its angled rooftops, shadows spilt by the will of its watery sun. The trouble is, you all think you understand the will of Darley, he muttered distastefully, yet even I cannot fully fathom how much of my work is an expression of myself, the world, or the world of others. Tell me about your life, Salvador, the woman begged on tenterhooks. You said that you were waiting for me to discover your secrets. Describe for me the moments that led us here, so that I may understand your final truth. Refusing to turn away from a truly momentous and inspirational view, the ageing frailty of a self-confessed genius began to unravel the pieces of his soft-brushed puzzle, an enigma that he had kept close to his heart for a very long time. So there we go. You want to find out more about that puzzle, you're going to have to grab a copy of Tales of the Undead Hellwhore, but I really hope you enjoyed that little snippet. In the meantime, I hope you have a good week, and we'll catch up again next week. Take care, guys. Bye.
We'll be right back.